It's Friday here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Brian Batko. We're going to look at the Russell Wilson situation in Pittsburgh and whether that needs to change or what's going on with it entirely and whether or not he should be the plan long term. That, a look into their playoff hopes and into what's going on this weekend with our Pick Six, all here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Brian Batko, one of our great Steelers beat writers. And as always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes, and sometimes Thursday episodes, because that's what we had to do this week. And you can find those on your favorite podcast app and YouTube. And as always, the show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-994-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Brian, we talked about the loss on our Thursday episode. The guys talked about it, post game. So we're kind of past the Chiefs game itself and more, just looking at a 10-6 Steelers team on a 3-game losing streak, trying to right the ship on a 10, with their 10-day break before the regular season finale against the Bengals. So there's a lot to look at here, but I think that one thing that we can all look at is the Russell Wilson situation and how that's gone this year. Now, on the whole, Russell Wilson, I think, has been a positive for the Steelers, but he's also had, if we're being honest about, how he's played into this losing streak. He's also not exactly played well during this losing streak. I gave him more of a pass for the Eagles game because he only got the ball twice in the second half, and one of those was a Najee Harris fumble, but his numbers against the Ravens, he practically killed the team with 2 turnovers against the Ravens, one in the red zone, another was a pick six that basically sealed the game. And in this last game, whereas his overall numbers, didn't look abysmal, he didn't throw a touchdown pass, he did run for a touchdown, threw an interception, got sacked 5 times, and just did not see the field well at all. Pat Freiermuth opened a lot in this game, and he wasn't able to find him. And so the question then becomes, should the plan be for the Steelers to keep him long term?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was just kind of like calm down a little when people were asking, a few weeks ago, what should the Steelers re-sign Russ for? Is 3 years, $120 million too much? And it's like, just hang on a minute. I get the need for speculation and how much people always want to spin it forward and look to the future, even when you're in the midst of a season. I mean, that's just kind of what we do in this business, and that's kind of what fans do. But the Steelers aren't going to renegotiate in season, so you were always going to get a clearer picture of Russell Wilson's fit here and his long-term ability before Omar Khan and company need to make that decision. And certainly you laid it out there, Chris, and I think George Pickens was open more than he got the rock on Wednesday as well, and kind of a mixed bag for him. I know you and Ray talked about it. The effort stuff was iffy a lot, but I also give George the slightest bit of credit for not completely freaking out with the 2 or 3 times that he was missed downfield and not blowing a gasket, and just instead showing sort of the garden variety body language and frustration. But yeah, it speaks to some of the regression I think we've seen from Russ these last couple weeks, especially. He was brought in to elevate the quarterback play. He's done that for sure. He's been better than I expected. I'll admit that, no doubt. But he's also supposed to be the veteran who's taking care of the football and allowing this team to follow its familiar formula and script by winning the turnover battle and clamping down defensively and maybe getting a couple takeaways of their own. Clearly, none of that is working at the moment. I think with these turnovers, these costly, timely turnovers, Russ's market value is decreasing a bit, and it is worth keeping in mind that he didn't play the first 6 games of the season, so we do have a compressed sample size to evaluate him here in 2024. And yet, all that being said, I mean, I certainly don't think he's the biggest issue right now or anything like that. He has been better on balance than the quarterback play post Ben Roethlisberger the previous 2 seasons. I just was. This is why I wanted to wait and not kind of put the cart before the horse when it came to looking at new deals for Russ and locking him in as the 2025 quarterback.
No, I agree that you had to wait. I mean, there's some people that were saying, "Oh, sign him now," and I was like, "Yeah,
Right.
you can wait to the end of the
Some people were
season
also
now."
saying that about Najee Harris midseason, and it's like, guys, he had a really good stretch. The three consecutive 100-yard games were great. He looked good. He was running hard, but it's not like he would suddenly became a different guy. I mean, he wasn't all of a sudden ripping off home run runs or anything. And now, of course, everybody has wildly fluctuated back the other way on Najee. I mean, this is what we're here for, Chris, whether it's the Steelers in general or Russ or Najee. Like, we all have our role in this ecosystem. Fans are reactionary. They get really mad when the team loses. They get really way over their skis when they win, call them a Super Bowl contender. We're here to see the forest for the trees. And, this 3-game losing skid really rough. I still think the Steelers can win a postseason game this year, first time in 7 years, because so much of it does depend on who you play and the matchups. And I still think that would be a step forward in a quote unquote successful season. Everybody always wants to throw out that phrase. And if that's the case, then yeah, I would certainly entertain bringing back Russell Wilson, but it needs to be a deal that makes sense for you after, the way he finished out the season.
No, see, I agree, and that's my thing. I've always thought that the Steelers' rule on not, just hey, we're not re-signing guys once the season start. Like it's I think it's a good rule, and there's sometimes I think that situation like, oh man, maybe they should break it there. But it's things like this that kind of allow you to say, nah, let's wait this one out. Let's see how this plays out. And I think that's where if you're looking at things for the Steelers, you kind of benefit from saying, okay, Russ, a part of what Russ was brought, even beyond his arms talent or anything like that, was his leadership to get this team through tough moments. This is a tough moment. This is adversity right now. This is 3 straight losses. Can he be a part of the solution to get a win against the Bengals? You win against the Bengals, you pretty much lock up. You're the 5 seed, facing the Texans. That's a winnable playoff game, in my opinion. You win those 2 games, then you set yourself up for a chance to go to Kansas City or go to Buffalo, which would be 2 very tough games, but you give yourself the chance at the improbable upset that would, I think, flip everything on its head from what you've been experiencing. But again, let him go do that before you sign it. And also, again, Justin Fields factors in here too, because he played well enough to help them get to 4-2 in the early part of the season. Granted, Russell Wilson has played better since he's taken over, but obviously Russell Wilson's older, Justin Fields younger, and he has a higher ceiling, and you're trying to clean him off of what the bad habits that he picked up in Chicago. I see the upside there. So I'm with you. I think it's good that they're on a holding pattern on Russell Wilson in the future. I would not be shocked if they did, but I also think that even if Russell Wilson, unless Russell Wilson balls out and gets them to the Super Bowl, they should not be paying him $30 million a year next year. I think ideally you get him to like anywhere between 20 to 25 if he plays well enough at the end of the season, because then you're saying, hey, Russ, we like you like us, but you're not Superman, and this team needs holes filled. And if you want to win Super Bowls like you said you did before you got here, you're gonna need to let us have some more salary cap space to make things happen. Granted, it's not a guarantee that he would actually go for that.
Yeah, and I hate to be nihilistic about any team's NFL chances in the league these days, but it does still kind of feel like, and we'll have the answer to this in less than 2 months here, Chris, but it does feel like if you don't have a handful of quarterbacks in the league right now, you probably aren't wearing the rings anyway. So, yeah. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean you always have to swing for the fences and you're just going to rip up the plan every year and draft a new guy. If you don't have Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow, 3 guys who have not won a Super Bowl there, whom I just mentioned. But yeah, I mean, it is difficult to kind of envision hoisting that Lombardi with the way Russ has played recently. But certainly I think there's so little margin for error that you can't be putting the ball on the ground. You can't be throwing that interception to Justin Reed. I know George Pickens botched that play, but I don't absolve Russ of the blame there, because
right,
it sure looked like he should have seen that the play was botched, and okay, you need to tuck it down, live to fight another day, or just go elsewhere with it. I think on that play, Jaylen Warren was wide open, nobody around him in the right flat. So,
Van Jefferson was open in the end zone. Granted, Van Jefferson, but still, there
yeah,
were options on that play.
yeah, and I mean, we saw it on Hard Knocks Tuesday night. If you watched it, Ravens had one of their defensive analysts up there in front of the team talking about Russ, saying this guy has layups and 3-pointers. There's no intermediate game with him. So, I mean, teams have the script on Russ, and yeah, now it's up to him to counterpunch. That's one thing he's done really good in individual games this season, bouncing back from slow starts where we're sitting there in the press box. Fans are probably sitting there at home saying, oh boy, Russ is cooked. Russ is washed. He's turning back into a pumpkin. Well, he has gotten off the mat in these games against the Commanders, the Jets. So now he's got to do that in this final stretch of the season, the Week 18 game first against the Bengals, and then obviously whoever they get here in the first round of the playoffs.
Well, let's talk about the playoffs in a sec here, because I think that's the big thing that the Steelers are looking at. The Steelers are in the playoffs. Like, they are guaranteed to play at least 2 more games this season, despite this losing streak. We'll talk about what the favorable situations are if they were to make the playoffs and how they need to handle that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I remind you, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims answer that very question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle the what's next question. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, let's talk about playoff scenarios. Now, the thing is that the Steelers' playoff scenarios are, for the most, like, they're not, they don't need to get in. Again, they are in. They've done the work to get there. But the scenarios are now for where they will seed. Now, they can't get the 1 or the 2, and because of the Ravens win last week and the Steelers lost, the Steelers and Ravens both going against the Steelers there. The Ravens now have a 1-game lead on the Steelers because the Ravens beat the Steelers last week. They now do not have the tiebreaker going in the favor of Pittsburgh. Both teams 3-2 in the division. Both teams playing divisional opponents next week, and the Ravens get to play the 3-12 Browns, who I don't even know who's their starting quarterback right now, and the Steelers get to play the Bengals. I think it's safe to say the Steelers have lost the AFC North. The Ravens are going to just win it by winning next week. But that was what I predicted at the beginning of the season anyway. This was the Ravens division to win. They're one of the better teams. I picked them to make the Super Bowl. I still think they could and they will. But I do think that the Steelers still.
Did you know I did too, Chris?
I didn't know that. Look at us, just smart gentlemen here. That's why we're here. That's why we're at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, because we do these things. But it still does matter that the Steelers beat the Bengals, because if the Steelers lose to the Bengals and the Chargers and the Chargers or the Broncos win their last 2 games, the Steelers could drop to the 6th seed or even the 7th seed. And then instead of playing a road game against the Texans, which would be a very beatable, if you look at all of the division leaders right now in the AFC North, it's like that Dragons picture where you see like 3 really bad looking Dragons and then 1 goofy looking one. That's the Texans right now.
Just like old times with the AFC South, really. We had like that one nice little year there where the Texans looked like a juggernaut, and we are right back to, it's so weird, but kind of both conferences, the South Division is always.
What is it about the South?
I don't know. They should have the best football in the South.
Yeah, if you go by college football stuff. But to the point, they're the 5 seed right now. Beat the Bengals, you're locked into the 5 seed. Unless the Ravens lose, then you're the 3 seed. But beat the Bengals, you're the 5 seed, and you want to avoid that. But if you lose to the Bengals, you give the chance for the Chargers or the Broncos to overtake you in this, and then you either go on the road to Baltimore, playing them again in short order, or go on the road to Buffalo. Neither of which I think the Steelers would want to do, coming off of where again, if you lose to the Bengals, you're on a 4-game losing streak going to the house of a really good team. That would spell a not good situation for them.
Yeah, the way I view it right now, as we sit here today on Friday, Chris, is I think the worst case scenario for the Steelers is going to Buffalo again. That's also the worst case for me. I don't want to make that trip. Like, That's what I'm really rooting against. That
More
was
lake effect
miserable last
snow,
year.
baby.
Yeah, you just know that they're going to get dumped on with snow and it's cold. Getting to the game is a pain, traffic. But clearly, from an X's and O's between the lines standpoint, you don't want to go into the Bills Mafia and try to win that game. It will also be deja vu. It'd be kind of boring. Like that to me is the top of worst case scenario. Then there's a pretty big gap. Then I think it's going to Baltimore. I know the Ravens just whooped on them at M&T Bank Stadium, but it's Steelers-Ravens still, and in this case, it's a playoff game. Weird things can and do happen, especially in a one-off. So I wouldn't say that's a definite loss for the Steelers like I would the Bills. And then I think there's a huge gap again to the third potential scenario of going to Houston. That's a game I think the Steelers can and actually would win. I would probably take them to win in Houston right now. As badly as it went last year, is it week 3 or 4 with Kenny Pickett starting? The Texans just demolished them. But Texans, I mean, they got embarrassed even more than the Steelers did on Christmas Day, scoring 2 points against the Ravens. So, yeah, I mean, I think the Texans, this is kind of just a lost season for them at this point. Don't get me wrong, CJ Stroud could get hot, but I mean, even he's not playing as well. So I think that would be about as good as the Steelers could hope for if they don't get that home playoff game that seemed somewhat close to a lock at one point here. But again, that's always when you sort of forget the 3-game stretch that you had coming up. When the days are sunny, you forget that the cold forecast is being called for later in the year. So, yeah, I mean, I think that that would not be the worst thing for the Steelers to go to the Texans. It'd be a lot better than Ravens and certainly a lot better than Bills. And I think that's ultimately what's going to happen, Chris. I think, ask me again tomorrow night after we see what happens in Broncos Bengals and whether Cincinnati's defense looks like it's up to the challenge at all here coming down the stretch. But I think the Steelers will find a way to hold serve against the Bengals at home. They'll have the long mini bye to get ready for it. Mike Tomlin teams usually a lot better on extra rest than they are short rest. And we know how they shredded them the first time around. And I don't get the sense that this team is completely lost or anything like that. Just last year, they had an even worse 3-game losing skid. I mean, when you consider the competition that they faced, not necessarily the lopsided margins, but I mean, they lost to Bailey Zappi for crying out loud. So yeah, they found a way to rebound last year around this time. I think they can do that again and beat the Bengals at home and set themselves up for that 5 seed. But man, the wheels have come off here clearly, and I still think the Steelers are a good team. They're not a great team. They're not one of the NFL's elites, and I was always hesitant to put them in that conversation, even when they were looking good at 10-3. So that's just kind of what it is. We mentioned the Ravens predictions from us at the beginning of the season. I had the Steelers at 10-7 and narrowly missing the playoffs. Could still be 10-7, but we know they're in the postseason, and now it's just coming down to these last 8 quarters of football to show they're not the same old Steelers and that they did make some progress with all the moves they made this offseason.
No, yeah, I think that's the opportunity that you get to see here. And again, you want to see maturity. You want to see bouncing back from that. Again, you win this game. Let's look at the possibility of let's say the playoff situation goes as it is right now. Chiefs are the 1, but Bills 2, Ravens 3, Texans 4, Steelers 5, Chargers 6, Broncos 7. That's how it sits right now. You could be looking at playing the Texans in the first round. Again, not a guaranteed win, but they're playing even worse than you. And they've had a rough year in general.
Deontay Johnson revenge game.
That's true. Another one. Part two. Yeah. How many guys get 2 revenge games in the same year?
And he could have had 3. He could have had 3 if he would have not just bailed on the Ravens. But yeah, I will be curious to see if he can get up to speed with 10 days off for the Texans and if he can help out. I mean, if there's ever a situation that might make the guy happy, he should be getting snaps and targets with how many injuries they have in their receiving corps.
Exactly. But you look at in that scenario, you'd see the Bills playing the Broncos and the Ravens playing the Chargers. Now, I think that the Chargers and the Broncos have done some impressive things this year. I didn't expect the Broncos to be any good this year. That them being in the playoffs picture it's actually pretty impressive to me what they've been able to pull together. The Chargers, I started to write them off, but then they've had a really good surge of late. But I look at them and I'm not sure if either of those teams pull off the upsets in Buffalo or in Baltimore because those quarterbacks you're playing. So let's say the chalk goes, except for the Steelers game where they might beat the Texans. The Steelers in that case would be the lowest seed, and then they would be heading to Arrowhead to play the Chiefs there, while the Bills and Ravens duke it out. If that's the case there, let's say this happens, Brian. They win this next game. They beat the Texans, but then they still go to Kansas City and ultimately lose lose there in the playoffs. Is that an improvement from just losing there in the first round of the playoffs 3 years ago? Is it or losing in the first round of the playoffs to the Bills last year?
It's definitely a half measure. I get that, but I still say yes. I mean, I think when you look at the playoff drought would be over. Now, I know that Art Rooney II sat there at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex last January and said, we want to start having some playoff success. And TJ Watt and Cam Hayward have said, we need to start winning playoff games, plural, which kind of inherently means you've got to make a little bit of a run there to really feel good. But I look at it more as you're in the post-Ben wilderness here. And that wilderness actually kind of began with late-stage Ben, who was not the guy that you felt like you had a chance with every playoff run because of him under center. He just wasn't the same player anymore. I would still view it as, a successful season. And you took a step forward. You won a playoff game. Now you're going to recalibrate for the following year and say, okay, let's find out how we get closer to the Ravens, Bills, and Chiefs and win 2 playoff games or maybe 3. I get that there doesn't seem to be much optimism for that after this 3-game skid, but that would be the sort of linear thinking to take you there. And I don't love moving the goalposts in terms of people saying, well, no, they were 10-3. They should have won the division title. They should have got a home playoff game. They should have been able to beat one of these teams. Like, again, maybe it's just because me personally, I was never on that train. I'm not going to call the Steelers pretenders because I never really thought they were legitimately masquerading as contenders. I think they beat a lot of teams they were supposed to beat. By and large, took care of business and got the job done against less talented teams. And then they faced more talented teams, and they did what I thought was going to happen in May and September. And, maybe going into December, I thought they'll steal one of those 3 games, but that's not how it played out. They lost all 3. So, I still think that I would say on balance, once we take a step back and it's not so fresh and reactionary, that yes, 2024, after changing offensive coordinators, changing QB1, QB2, bringing in a new inside linebacker to play every snap, that it was better than previous seasons. And I guess good is in the eye of the beholder, but at least an okay season and a marginal improvement season. But I know it's the Steelers. They're still judged on making AFC championship games, going to Super Bowls, winning Super Bowls. But that's just, I think we all know that wasn't really realistically in the cards this year.
Absolutely. We will keep an eye on these things, and we'll be talking more about this playoffs race, especially when we're back next week as the Steelers prepare to play the Bengals in a game that I mean, I guess it's technically not must win, but in my opinion, it's a must win if they want to get a playoff win, because I don't think 0-4 4-game losing streak going into Buffalo or Baltimore is a good scenario for this team. But we got to get to our pick 6. We're going to go over 6 games going on this weekend as the Steelers are done, but there's plenty of other action to keep an eye on. We'll give you our picks in those games next here on the North Shore Drive podcast. But first, I want to remind you the show is brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They are mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, PA, or at moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
It's that time of year again to get the Honda of your dreams during Happy Honda Days, where you'll find great offers on a sporty new Civic, spirited Accord, fun-to-drive HR-V, and versatile CR-V. So don't wait. Turn your holiday dreams into reality with a new Honda named KBB.com's best value brand. Buy online, reserve from select dealers, or visit your local Honda dealer today.
Back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Brian Batko. We now head to our pick six, where each weekend we give you 6 games that don't involve the Steelers and our predictions on them heading into it. Let's start off with a big one. Saturday, 4:31 p.m. Eastern time. I do think this is a game that all Steelers fans should be paying attention to because of the stakes of it. The Broncos are at the Bengals. The Bengals are 3-point favorites in this game. The Bengals need to win this game to keep their playoff hopes alive. And Brian, I think this could have a lot to go for it for the Steelers as well, because if the Bengals lose this game, they're eliminated from the playoffs. And yes, well, they'd want to play spoiler to the Steelers. They can't really knock them out of the playoffs. I could see guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins maybe being like, yeah, we're shutting it down for the year. And the Steelers might go up against a less than full Bengals roster in that game. And not that the Steelers should need that to win. I do think it could be another thing that helps them kind of get themselves together and use that as a get right game. Plus, I think eliminating that kind of puts everyone else at ease. Because then it would just come down to the Colts and the Dolphins. I also think the Broncos are going to win this game. I know the Bengals are favored, but I like the way the Broncos have been playing on defense. Nick Bonito has been a force off the edge. He's been getting pick sixes and sacks and doing a whole lot of other things. I think that they do enough on offense to move the ball against what's been a helpless defense that the Bengals give. So give me the Broncos winning this one in the upset.
Yeah, I don't know why. Last I checked, T. Higgins is questionable for this game, so I don't know why they would put him out there week 18. I don't even know why you would put Joe Burrow out there if the season's over. He's had the wrist problem, and
let him rest.
It's gonna be a little chilly in Pittsburgh, I'm sure. So yeah, I wouldn't mess around with that. Did you say this game's at 4:31?
4:31 Saturday.
Okay, I will not turn the TV on a minute sooner. So 4:31 it is. I'm gonna go Bengals. I think it's gonna be a high-scoring game. I think it turns into, Bo Nix and Joe Burrow. Nix putting points on the board because the Bengals defense is soft. Burrow putting points on the board because he and Jamar Chase are really good.
Really good, yeah.
Yeah, and especially if T. Higgins can get out there and suit up. I think good game, back and forth, close game. Bengals survive for another week and make life, even tougher on the Steelers for the momentum that they'll be bringing into Acrisure Stadium. I would assume too, if the Bengals beat the Broncos, Bengals probably be Saturday, right? Wouldn't that make more sense to have like the first team in the order of AFC playoff hunt play, and then they're kind of waiting in the clubhouse to see what goes on with the AFC West teams?
I guess so. I've another reason I'm selfishly hoping that the Broncos win is that that the game becomes less relevant and they just schedule it for a Sunday 1 p.m. and I'm just like, thank you, get everyone out of there.
I hear you, but no, I'm gonna go Bengals, but I could see it going either way for sure.
For sure. Cardinals at Rams, the other Saturday game. This one at 8:16 p.m. If you want to make sure you're not tuning in too early there, Brian.
Thank you.
The Rams are 6.5-point favorites. The Cardinals are eliminated from the playoffs. I didn't even realize that things were that tight in the NFC, but they're out of the playoffs. The Rams can clinch the NFC West with a win here. The Seahawks won on Thursday Night Football, but because the Rams have swept the Seahawks, I believe they have the tiebreaker that can't be beaten. If you're the Rams. So if you're the Rams, you want to close this out, and I think they will. They've been playing good football. They could be a sneaky team in the NFC playoffs that just knocks off one of those really good NFC North teams, or this Eagles team that's now really banged up. Jalen Hurts is hurt. Even Kenny Pickett, who's going to play, we'll get to that, is hurt. The Rams could be a sneaky team in these NFC playoffs.
Yeah, just to gently correct you, Chris, the Rams play the Seahawks next week, but they must have the other tiebreaker scenarios already in place. So, yeah, Rams winning in. Cardinals, I think they'll be frisky in this game. I think it could be close because they're the type of young team that is going to want to, go into 2025 with a little bit of hope and feeling like they ended on a high note. But James Conner's banged up. I don't know why you'd put him out there. Jonathan Gannon as their head coach, he's kind of he could use a little bit of a strong finish to this season. So I think it'll be close, but Rams have a lot to play for. Cardinals simply do not. I will take LA at home. And yeah, they actually are the team that goes into the postseason with a little bit of juice and feeling like maybe they can still make a run as long as Matthew Stafford's throwing the ball well.
if the Rams win this game and then yeah, you're right, they can't have swept the Seahawks because they play them next week. But if they win these next 2 games, they'll head into the playoffs on a 6-game winning streak. And one of those 6 games that they won was against the Buffalo Bills. That I'm telling you, man, watch out for Los Angeles. Sean McVay may have something cooking with Matt Stafford. All right, let's move on to the Sunday games. This one kind of interesting because of who's involved. The Cowboys at the Eagles, classic NFC East rivalry. Like I always tell people, no matter what's going on, I wish I could be at my old alma mater, Chain University, and just find the closest place where I know Cowboys and Eagles fans are going to convene, because Steelers Ravens fans hate each other. Steelers and all the AFC hate. There is a special kind of hate between those two fan bases. The Eagles, though, are 7.5-point favorites, and we just learned that Kenny Pickett is set to start for this game. Nick Sirianni saying that here this Friday morning. Brian, I might be crazy here. Also, literally just now as I'm saying this, the Cowboys, the FanDuel has just turned this into a 7-point favorites for the Eagles. But I might be crazy here. I think I'm picking the Cowboys.
Ooh.
I think I'm going for
They're shutting down CeeDee Lamb. Did you see that news?
I did not. Never mind. I'm going with the Eagles. They're pack it up. Get out of here. The Dallas stinks.
Yeah, I'm actually taking Kenny Pickett as well. I guess it was kind of a up and down game for him against the Commanders when he got his shot in place of Jalen Hurts, which if you've watched the Steelers the last couple years, you know that there was ups and downs with Kenny Pickett, more downs than ups in the end, and never really the consistency. So yeah, he has an opportunity here at home against the Cowboys team that they've got nothing to play for, but I mean, they're still kind of fighting, surprisingly, even if Mike McCarthy is a lame duck, and Micah Parsons made some weird quotes about him about a month ago, and yet they are not going down without a fight. They're winning games that they really have no reason or business to win here late in the season. They just beat the Bucks, I believe, right? So try to make sense of that one. But still, I'll take Kenny Pickett and the Eagles at home. They've got enough talent on their roster to take down Cooper Rush, and yeah, I mean, they can hand the ball to Saquon Barkley. They'll get out of there with a win.
Yeah, I looked at Cooper Rush and I was thinking with CeeDee Lamb, and he's actually made some impressive throws. I've been like, I didn't think Cooper Rush was going to do anything.
And then you try to think of another Cowboys receiver, and you're like,
never mind. Yeah, that's out of there. So yeah, give me the Eagles. Let's move along here throughout our pick 6 here.
You think Steelers fans are going to watch that game? I kind of want to see it.
I think I know a certain portion of the fan base that will, and every time Kenny Pickett makes a play is going to be very loud about it. And it's the same fan base that I provide coverage for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, because Pitt fans cannot wait for Kenny Pickett to, like, can you imagine Kenny Pickett winning a playoff game for the Eagles this year? And that's going to be spicy.
That's understandable. He's a program legend. He did a lot of
great things.
No,
I'm not making fun.
Yeah.
I'm pointing out like that it's going to be some heat on Twitter. I'm actually kind of looking forward to this.
There's no other good 1 p.m. games, and I mean, as you can see, we're picking a lot of NFC on our pick 6 this week, because that's mainly where the intrigue lies right now. But yeah, I'll happily tune into Cowboys Eagles.
Well, look, I think this is my game of the week coming up here. Packers at Vikings. The Vikings are 1.5-point favorites. You look at the current situation and you see the NFC North, and it is just packed right now. You got the Lions holding on to that 1 seed at 13-2, but tied with them are the Minnesota Vikings, and they're a 13-2 5 seed. The Packers an 11-4 6 seed. It is crazy in the NFC right now. I love the way Minnesota's playing. I love the way they play defense. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, another Pitt guy in that conversation. Lots of things they got going for them. But give me the Packers. I think that they're going to find a way to go into Minnesota and win this game. Jordan Love. And yes, technically, I think that actually I don't think the Packers can't win the division. So literally they have nothing to play for, but I think that they're going to find a way to sneak in and win this game against Minnesota. And that'll actually end up helping the Lions, because that'll back the Vikings off of the Lions in this race.
I suppose the Packers are still playing for seeding to some extent here, right? I can't imagine they're locked into 6, but
that's true.
But yeah, I mean, these two teams played the first time. It was really close. The Vikings pulled it out. It's not that I've done a 180 on Sam Darnold, but I've more so just started to buy into this Kevin O'Connell culture the Vikings have. I mean, they've just kind of rallied around each other, and clearly he's scheming things up for Darnold to make him look like a better quarterback than we've seen to this point in his NFL lifespan. I'm going to take the Vikings at home against the Packers.
Okay, Vikings at home, Vikings, Packers, we split there. This next game has a lot of implications on it. Falcons at Commanders. Commanders are 4.5-point favorites. If you look at the NFC and the teams that are still in the playoff hunt, it's just two teams that are outside the picture. It's the Seahawks and the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are only in it because the NFC South is so bad, and they're tied with the Falcons, and the Falcons have the current tiebreaker. Both are 8-7. The Seahawks can actually catch the Commanders if the Commanders were to lose out and the Seahawks were to win out. The Seahawks also you're also looking at hoping that the Rams can lose in that factor as well. But if the Commanders win, they clinch the playoffs. Then the only way that Seattle can get in is if the Rams lose a game and the Seahawks win out. So looking at that scenario and looking at the way Jaden Daniels played against the Eagles last week, give me Washington. I like Michael Penix. I like what he's done early here for the Falcons, and it looks like that change was the right move. But I think that this Commanders team, they're another good team. Like when the Steelers beat that team, that was an impressive win, and that was a road win. It was a good win, and this is a good Washington team. And if I'm the Eagles, I'm a little concerned because they just beat me. If the playoffs hold as they are right now, the Commanders would be playing the Eagles in Philadelphia for the first game of the playoffs, and if Jalen Hurts isn't back, I'd be really intrigued to see Jaden Daniels throw down against Kenny Pickett again. But give me the Commanders in this one, beating the Falcons. And by the way, Falcons losing would open the door for the Buccaneers to jump in and take a playoff spot there. But we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, the NFC South is pretty nuts. I'm not sure if the Seahawks can catch the Commanders because of conference record, but either way, I think the Commanders are a team that they're going to be galvanized a little bit by beating Kenny Pickett and the Eagles last week. A lot of funky stuff happened. Maybe it doesn't go that way if they have to face Jalen Hurts for 4 quarters and they turn the ball over a bunch. But I think Jaden Daniels against Michael Penix is going to be fun to watch in that game. And I think Penix clearly has had Daniels has had more of a head start than Penix in terms of trying to win a big game in the NFL. And I give Penix credit for leading the Falcons out there last week, but beating the Giants is kind of like taking down a bowl of soup before you get to your real meal. Then we'll see how much you're made of. I'm going to go Commanders at home in this one too.
Last game, Monday Night Football, Lions at Niners. Lions 3.5-point favorites. The Lions? But the Niners, they've been hurt up. Granted, the Lions are also hurt up. I just thought this spread should be a lot more. I'm sorry. Give me the Lions. They're bulldozing the Niners, who have nothing to play for and are really banged up right now.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll put a little bit of stock into is, does Kyle Shanahan cook up a game plan here just to try to feather in his cap type of win against the Lions in an otherwise lost season for the Niners? I think it could be close in this game, but yeah, the Lions are just finding ways to win week in and week out. They've got Teddy Bridgewater back on their 53-man roster now after he finished coaching his high school alma mater this football season. So yeah, I mean, they have to make the long trip out to San Francisco. And like you said, they're kind of leaking oil a little bit when it comes to the health quotient. But yeah, I think they'll go to San Francisco, win this game, and Jared Goff can get a dub back in his old stomping grounds in Northern California, the Bay Area.
Oh, all right. There we go. That's our pick.
We only disagreed on what? Broncos, Bengals, I guess. Yeah, it wasn't a great slate.
Packers, Vikings.
Oh, yeah, and you almost picked the Cowboys, but
I almost picked the Cowboys, and then you told me CeeDee Lamb was out. I'm like, I'm out of here. See, get me off this train. But a lot of interesting games there again, I think, and also interesting for playoff stakes. So lots to still watch this weekend, Steelers fans. I know you're bummed out about the three game losing streak, but the Steelers still stand to maybe improve their status or hold their status in the playoffs based off of what happens this weekend.
And Mason Rudolph starting again for the Titans too, right? Against the Jaguars.
Yes,
so if you double box Titans, Jags, and Eagles, Cowboys, it'll be like you're watching the 2022 and 2023 Steelers.
And there'll still be a debate of who was the better quarterback. I'm sure going on Twitter. But all that. We'll be back Monday talking about what we saw in the NFL and getting you ready for Steelers Bengals that next week here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette from Chris Carter and Brian Batko. I hope everyone continues to enjoy their time in the holidays. We'll see you here on Monday.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.